Hey VC, it's Jonathan, your cheap and cheerful record collector. A little different angle on my room today. Actually, we're on the opposite wall from where we usually film. I thought I'd try something different. Today I'm doing a thread from Steve at Flipside CT, which is Under the Radar. So this is basically, my first thought when I saw it, I thought he meant artists under the radar, but I think he meant more either artists whose particular albums were under the radar and or artists who were under the radar. So I thought about it. I'm probably going to end up doing two videos because I had so much stuff I wanted to share. The first one I'm starting off with was, I grew up in New York back in the 60s, and we had a lot of hometown bands. I mean, you had the Rascals, Simon and Garfunkel, of course the Velvet Underground. They were like the real New York bands. And another New York band that never really made it in the big scene or all over the country, but were huge in New York for many years, was a band called the Blues Project. Now, the Blues Project included Al Kooper, Danny Kalb, Steve Katz, and who else was on the band? I'm drawing a blank right now. Anyway, they were the quintessential New York band. Saw them many, many times back in the day. If you don't have this album, it is bluesy. It's bluesy for sure, but it has a lot of jazz influences in it. Al Kooper, leader of the band, actually when this was going on, right around that time, played on Dylan's Rainy Day Women and Let's Go Get Stoned. He played organ on those albums. So this is a great, great album from that era. A lot of people don't know it. Probably have seen it around. Great album. So when this group broke up, Al Kooper said, you know, I'm going to do a little bigger band. And he had an idea for a bigger band. And the next band he did was a band you all know, but you may not know their first album, was Blood, Sweat, and Tears. Now, this is their first album. Al Kooper, his idea was to the band. He created it, his vision. This is the record for me, the only record worth getting from Blood, Sweat, and Tears. They put out this one album, which is very innovative, very jazzy, just a fantastic record. After this album came out, he got into a fight with his band, and they basically kicked him out of the band that he formed and hired David Clayton Thomas to do the singing. And I think everything after this album is not worth listening to. But this album, Under the Radar, Blood, Sweat, and Tears' first album. Al Kooper was also instrumental in another record he put together after Blood, Sweat, and Tears broke up, or he was kicked out of Blood, Sweat, and Tears. He put out an album, wanted to do an album called Super Session with Mike Bloomfield. Mike Bloomfield had played guitar with the Paul Butterfield Blues Band initially. He invited Bloomfield to record this album called Super Sessions, and they recorded one side, and the next time Bloomfield never showed up for the recording, having issues with substance abuse, and he called his friend Stephen Stills, who came over and recorded the second side. So this is also Al Kooper album with Mike Bloomfield and Stephen Stills. A lot of people know it, but some people may not know it or know of it. Great album. Super Sessions. After Super Sessions album came out, he did a concert at Fillmore East and put out this album called The Live Adventures of Mike Bloomfield and Al Kooper. Recorded the Fillmore West, actually. This was recorded at Fillmore West, September 26, 27, 28, 1968. Also includes Elvin Bishop and Carlos Santana, and the cover is by Norman Rockwell. 2-record set, fantastic live album. So another one, maybe a little bit under the radar. That's my Al Kooper session of this video. Next up is an artist you know, but you may not know this record. He was in a band called The Band, and it is Levon Helm. This is his first album, Levon Helm and the RCO All-Stars. One of my favorite albums by him or any of the band albums. Take it out. They did a great bit with this record. So this is the record, and then when you take the thing out to get the record, it comes right out. It's all. And besides Levon Helm, it has Paul Butterfield again. Also has Dr. John, Booker T, Steve Cropper, Donald Duck Dunn, Lou Martini. I mean, it's a great, great album. So another one that's gone under the radar by a lot of people is this Levon Helm's work he did after he left the band. One of my favorites. Levon Helm and the RCO All-Stars. Great record. The next one is a man who was there at the beginning of the San Francisco psychedelic scene. He was with a band called the Charlatans. He played drums in that band, actually. And when the Charlatans broke up, he went on his own and did a number of albums. I just happened to pick this one. I think all his stuff, early stuff, is just great. He passed away last year, I think it was. Dan Hicks. And this is Dan Hicks. This is without the Hot Licks. His early albums with Dan Hicks and the Hot Licks. This is just called It Happened One Bite. Great record. If you don't know Dan Hicks, just fun stuff, makes you smile. Dan Hicks. Another guy whose solo albums might be under the radar for a lot of people. He played in a band we all know called Little Feat. And when they finally had enough of his drugging and alcohol and he left the band, which happened to him also when he first started off with Frank Zappa. In the first two Frank Zappa albums, he was thrown out of that band too for his drugging and alcoholism. It was Lowell George. This is a great album, Lowell George. Thanks, I'll Eat It Here. Might be under the radar for a lot of people, but a great, great record. Lowell George, I love it has the original $3.99 sticker on it. Next band is a band from New York also. When they first came out, people said they couldn't play instruments, they couldn't sing, but they had something to say. And they said it like no one else did. It was the Fugs. This is Ed Sanders and Tuli Kupferberg and Ken Weaver. I happened to be lucky enough to see the Fugs when I was like 16 years old, so I had about 1965 or so when they first were out. Like I said, it was my first non-chemical induced psychedelic experience, seeing the Fugs live. So very raw, very hard to get into, but if you can get into them, the Fugs were great. Have great songs in here like Frenzy, Group Grope, Going Down, Kill for Peace, The Virgin's Forest, and Dirty Old Man. So gives you an idea what the Fugs are into. Very raw, great stuff. The Fugs. Next one, a lot of people probably know this album, so maybe it's not such an under the radar, but Dave Edmunds and Nick Lowe put out one album together with a group called Rockpile, and this is Seconds of Pleasure. They did a lot of stuff solo because of contractual obligations. They weren't called Rockpile anymore, but a lot of the Dave Edmunds and Nick Lowe albums of this period were basically the exact same group that were on this album. And as someone said, this album sounds like Chuck Berry on speed. It's great stuff. Nick Lowe and Rockpile, 1980. Another artist everybody knows of or have seen, but may not have any of his solo stuff, who's sort of flown under the radar for many years for me, is one of my favorite guitarists of all time, is Cooter. And this is one of my favorite albums by him, Paradise and Lunch. This is from 74. I would definitely suggest if you see any Cooter albums, pick them up. Just, I've never done anything bad, I don't think. Everything has been either good or great. This is in the great category. Paradise and Lunch. Another artist that I love, and also I think under the radar. Also the late 60s, early 70s. Commander Cody and his Lost Planet Airmen. This is one of my favorite albums of his. This is Country Casanova. And there's the band in their tour bus. Again, any early Commander Cody and the Lost Planet Airmen albums are just great stuff. Does Rock the Boogie, Rave On, Buddy Holly song, Smoke, Smoke, Smoke That Cigarette. Also does Honeysuckle Rose. And one of my favorites, Everybody's Doing It. So there you go. Commander Cody. Next one, here's a guy you all know, but you may not know this particular album. He was in a group called The Animals. And this is Eric Burdon and War. And this album is called The Black Man's Burdon. And it is a great, great album. Double LP. Probably under the radar for many people. But the great Eric Burdon and War. And last, but certainly not least, one of my favorite artists of that period of then is David Bromberg. Wanted, Dead or Alive. This album was, I think, 70s somewhere, 74, yeah. Jerry Garcia plays on this too, by the way. But David Bromberg was in there. I saw him a number of times, and he's just a fantastic musician, banjo player, violin player, guitar player, singer. This is one of my favorite albums by him. Wanted, Dead or Alive. David Bromberg. So that's what I got for my part one of my Under the Radar. I hope if you don't know these artists, you'll jump in there and try to look for them, pick these up. Some of these are, I mean, they're all great albums, I think. Hopefully turn you on some things you didn't know about before. And happy holidays to everybody. If you're celebrating Hanukkah, happy Hanukkah to people. If you're celebrating Christmas, Merry Christmas coming up next week. And until next time, peace.